Cobalt Blue Holdings ASXCOB is more than just a Cobalt Explorer, and it has a number of prongs to the business model. And joining me right now is Joe Kaderavek from Cobalt. Hello, Joe.
G'day, Tim. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, before we talk about this, the business model underlying the Cobalt operation that you have, what is closing the Cobalt gap?
From an Australian perspective, the country has around 16% of the global cobalt resource. We're acknowledged as a safe and stable jurisdiction, and we're a close partner for those countries such as the US and EU, where these metals are going into predominantly or increasingly into EVs and batteries. So closing the gap is closing the gap between the resource at 16% and our current production at somewhere around 2 or 3%. In other words, it's standing up and creating a production chain, a global production chain that's commensurate with our endowment.
It's interesting that you say production chain. Now, I know that the government has awarded you a grant of $15 million over a period of time up to May 2025. Where's that money going?
Yeah, so the grant you're referring to is the Critical Minerals Accelerator Initiative. That's a Commonwealth scheme, and it's there for those companies involved in critical minerals who are nearing delivery of their feasibility studies and help accelerate that. So it does really two things. One is it adds a war chest to you to allow you then to focus on creating a complete feasibility study rather than looking to cut corners or maybe cut costs, as all of the juniors tend to do in these programs. So it allows a more fulsome approach. It also, and importantly, allows you to bring in elements which typically occur after the FS, but are long lead time items. For example, undertaking electrical, high voltage electrical survey with the providers. So typically you do that after a feasibility, but because it's a long lead time item, you can do that now. You can also do things like put deposits on long lead time items themselves. Much better to do it now and then save that downtime later.
Let's talk about the business model. The company's not only involved as an explorer, you're a miner. Not only are you a miner, you're a processing facility. Not only are you a processing facility, but you're able to license your stream waste processing technology around the world. Which one of those would you like to address first? BHCP, Kwinana, or the stream processing?
Let's go through it in order of the assets and in which they appeared on our in our portfolio. We'll start with Broken Hill, if you wish.
Well, let's go. What is Broken Hill? What is BHCP, and how does that fit into the operation?
Broken Hill Cobalt Project, BHCP, is a long life, 20+ year, large scale cobalt mine. So we're looking at extracting about 3,500 tonnes of cobalt metal. We're looking to add value to that metal by making an intermediate metal, which is a mixed hydroxide product, and then ultimately into a cobalt sulfate, which is the refining end of that business, but that will go into the battery industry. It's also a primary cobalt mine. Most cobalt globally is a byproduct. This is the exception. This is a primary mine, and that's really exciting for consumers of cobalt, because if they want to take an upstream investment, this is the most efficient investment per unit of cobalt that they can make anywhere.
And also, could I add, Joe, there that this is ethical cobalt as opposed to kids mining it in a third world nation?
Oh, absolutely. So we're based in Australia. As the namesake suggests, we're near the town of Broken Hill. This will be a large mechanically driven mine with big extractors, mining equipment. The ROM pad feeding into the refinery is all really a capital intensive business that's going to use some very advanced technology to produce the product. And it's as far away as you can conceive from artisanal mining or some of that less ethically sourced cobalt.
Mm. Now, once you get it out of the ground, it's got to get processed. So is this where the refinery comes in?
Yes, it does. Excuse me. The board made a decision about 18 months ago to look at where best to do that downstream refining. The problem with cobalt and all the battery materials is effectively once you make a sulfate from them, which is an once you make the refined product, the sulfate, it's a very delicate product from an environmental point of view. It melts at 40-something degrees. It absorbs moisture. It basically very easy to get dirty because the product cleanliness is measured in parts per million. So if you get that, store it inappropriately, you can contaminate that. So as a result of all of that, the board decided to keep the same flow sheet, but separate geographically the upstream from the refining. We chose Kwinana as the perfect destination because it was a port. It did give us access to very cheap reagents and chemicals, and it is a chemical-driven business at that stage. It's not a mining business in terms of refining. It also gave us access to the right people, so much more skills in laboratory-type environments, if you like. And importantly, and this is a really big selling point for Kwinana, it's the only district in the world where all the elements of the battery cathode pass through. There's nowhere else in the world where you get lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese passing through that district. So the ability to collaborate and then create a precursor material, which is the next step beyond cobalt sulfate, is as good in Kwinana as anywhere in the world. And
efficiencies of scale, I believe they call that.
They do.
And also, by centralising a refinery at Kwinana and not your own property, that means you're able to funnel offtake from other companies through the same process.
Yeah, look, I'll expand that into two benefits. It allows us to have a singular refinery while we build our waste streams business, which we'll go into, and that'll liberate more cobalt. So a singular refinery works better. It's an economy of scale business, but it also allows us to be a gateway for Australian cobalt to the world. And this is a pitch we're making at Commonwealth in particular, where we're saying, look, you won't conceivably build a dozen of these refineries to handle a dozen producers. What you want is a singular gateway with an economy of scale, and importantly, a gateway that hits the very demanding targets of the OEMs that make these electric vehicles. So very demanding targets. So we're going to come to the market and effectively look at bringing cobalt that's currently being produced as a byproduct into the EV stream and do that through our Kwinana refinery.
So in terms of, the critical mineral mandate that's contagious right now around the world, does your processing capabilities allow you to deal with a wider scope of critical minerals?
It does with the base metals. So we're looking predominantly to source cobalt-rich materials. Now, globally, that's difficult because, as I said earlier, it's a byproduct. There are cobalt-rich materials available within Australia, and there are cobalt-rich materials available, typically copper, cobalt, or nickel cobalt products available internationally. And as we speak, we're doing a large-scale test program for third-party products. So we're sourcing some domestically, we're sourcing some internationally. For example, we will look at Indonesia, Philippines, sourcing. We've got an entrenched Japanese partner. We did announce that earlier in the year with the refinery, and they're helping us source this product. So whilst we're preferencing cobalt-rich materials, what we ultimately want to do is put material into the US IRA or EU CRMA markets, which we believe will be a premium market going forward. We're just not there on the pricing yet. We're in a funk in terms of the cobalt market, but we think looking forward 3 or 4 years, these markets will really tighten up, particularly in those premium jurisdictions.
So this now leads us to the technology and the waste stream processing. Now, I believe that you're doing some processing for Flin in James Bay.
Sorry.
Continue, Joe.
Yeah, look, so we signed a test work arrangement with Hudbay Minerals in June. We announced that to the market. They're a good example of a partner that wants to look at compressing their rehabilitation exposure. So they've come to the end of the mine life at Flin Flon. Flin Flon, by the way, is in Manitoba in Canada.
I see.
And they're looking to compress their exposure on the rehab, but also do the right thing by the town, looking at potentially putting some extra life in the town by looking at a project that would effectively go through that recycling or desulfidization of that tails. There's also the potential of some metal in that product. I can't be too specific. That's in confidence. But that test is occurring now. We've had that for several months, and not surprisingly, pyrite located in waste in Canada is reacting and is treated the same way as pyrite waste in Australia. We've had now about half a dozen test samples done, and they all basically treat very much the same. So we're highly confident, no matter where it is globally, that if there's pyrite waste, particularly if there's metal locked in that waste, we can make a viable business from that.
Well, if you think about a lot of the tailings dumps that are around the world causing a acid leaching into the soil, so your process would go a long way to addressing that environmental issue.
Yeah, look, where there's liabilities attached to those tailings dams, that's more modern mining. Obviously, a lot of the older mines are abandoned or don't have any assets against them. Typically, the rehab provisions are done in certain areas. So, for example, you've got to rehab the ground, get rid of the concrete, get rid of the steel. But typically with sulfide tails, you're absolutely right. A major part of that is rehabilitation of the waste, so it doesn't produce acid or doesn't leak acid into the environment or the water table. That's particularly important in high rainfall areas such as in Queensland or in the tropics, where waste dumps can overflow. So removing the sulfur is effectively akin to removing either all or a large portion of that acid forming potential.
Wow. So Cobalt Blue Holdings, explorer, producer, refiner, and technology company. And I've been speaking with Joe Kaderavek, the CEO. Thank you very much, Joe, for talking with us. And you can look up Cobalt Blue Holdings on the internet. And the ASX ticker code is COB. Thank you very much for joining us, Joe.
Thanks for your time, Tim.